that. And the requests came in for something specific. Numerous people teaching these courses, especially on the college side, said that they wanted an updated book with an updated virtual machine, updated scripts, maybe whatever new techniques have come out, remove some of the old techniques, and they requested a hardcover version of this book specifically for textbook for a classroom. We balked at that at first, but I do get it. I don't want outdated content in classes. I understand that. So we are going to release a hardcover edition of the OSINT book early next year. I want to say very clearly, it will not be a full rewrite. It will be at most 20% updated content. It is not targeted towards people who already have the 8th edition. It's targeted towards new readers or people who are taking courses based on this stuff. It's also, I guess, targeted to people who just want the latest information. I know there's a lot of people now training based on the book. A lot of investigators are using the book. Basically, if you're making a bunch of money with the techniques in the book, you might want to get the latest edition. More details in January. This is just my transparent, fair warning that while I had no plans to do anything else with the OSINT book, I do understand the need for minor updates, but I want to just say very clearly again, if you have the 8th edition, this is not targeted towards you. I don't think this is a rewrite that you need to purchase again. It's really for the new people that just need the latest stuff. So that's coming in January, just fair warning. And that brings me to my guest today, which is Jason. Jason teaches the online video training for Intel Techniques. He teaches a lot of live courses for Intel Techniques. And Jason, first, welcome back to the show. And second, I understand that you were completely surprised by this disclosure. Is that correct?
Not completely. I believe we had a little bit of a gentleman's wager in which I came out on top. So I knew in some form the book was going to resurface. I did not realize it would be in this form, but honestly, I'm glad to have it. So the more books, the better as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to see a hardcover. That I've never had that. It's always been paperback books, so maybe that'll be something interesting. I also know that it's going to be an 8.5 by 11, so it'll be much larger. It'll be a bigger book, but 80% plus will be completely recycled. So again, this is not trying to get people to buy the new book. If anything, I will be talking you out of buying it in January. We'll visit that later. Let's get into the main matter at hand today, which is listener questions. You and I each received a list of the questions which were selected. Can you give us just a bit of a rundown of what we received and what we will be talking about today?
Yeah, basically there was a massive amount of response to your request for listener questions. So it looks like we received about 2,742 emails, and out of those, a couple thousand of those had full-on questions. And then after we went through and removed all the duplicates, that left about 1,000 left. And then really we just had to sort through and pick the ones that we thought addressed the most listeners' questions, right? Things that were common ground across the most people. But there was a lot of triaging and kind of vetting and having to go through and pare this down. Otherwise, this would be a 20-hour episode.
Well, I'm excited and terrified at the same time. You have full reign. You can ask, change, veto, do whatever you want. This show is completely in your hands, no pressure. But if you will, throw me a few softballs to get me warmed up.
Okay, so let's dive right in because we have a lot to get through. So, question number 1. More and more places are requiring proof of vaccination to dine in, work out, etc. Assuming the person is already fully vaccinated, what do you recommend showing to the establishment without revealing your true name, date of birth, or other sensitive information?
Well, nothing here can cause any controversy, right? That's a pretty valid question. I will be careful with this one. I will say this. If you are vaccinated and you have proof, and you are going somewhere that requires proof, and they are just looking at that proof, I really don't see much of a privacy invasion which will have consequences. I don't think that the bouncer at the club is remembering everyone's name and date of birth based on this card that people are showing them. I think it's kind of similar to showing your ID at the bar to get a drink. I know it's a lot different, but I'm just looking just from a raw privacy standpoint. I guess I wouldn't have a huge issue with it. My problem would be if they were scanning it and keeping a copy. I have not seen places doing that, but if someone says we need to scan your vaccine card with all of your information and keep a copy of it, I would resist that. I wouldn't participate with that. But again, everyone's going to be different here. But as far as just showing it, I just don't see the huge thing. What am I missing?
Nothing. Every place I've been to and gone through this, it has been extremely casual. None of these places actually have received any training on, what a real vaccination card even looks like. So what I've found is all these businesses are either required to do this by law or they're ticking a box, but the people looking at it don't seem to really care at all what you're showing them.
Yeah, and I haven't seen much at all of it, so that makes sense too. All right, what's next?
All right. How do I set a series of traps online so I can tell if anyone is trying to research me? So how can I put out some bait or some, like a honeypot or something to alert me if someone is researching me?
In the book, I talked a lot about canary tokens, which you can go to Canary Tokens and create a link or a document that you can throw out there, and if someone clicks on it, you get a notice. I don't use canary tokens much anymore because I found that they are more prone to fail. More email services are blocking them. So I guess if you want the easy thing, sure, go try a canary token and see if that works. What I recommend and what I do is I run my own website. I still have a website out there that's just, if you search MB's home address, that comes to that. And when you go to that page, of course, you don't see my home address, but then that alerts me and tells me information about your IP address and your computer and things like that. So if it were me, I would run your own domain, have your own website, and have the analytics that you want on that site, and then probably you're going to want to somehow populate that on search engines, which you can get those indexed. You can ask search engines to index that page, and then if someone researches you and they click that link, you can see some information. You're going to need to know a little bit about how hosting your own website works, but I think that's the best possibility, maybe just not the easiest. Start with canary tokens and see where that takes you. What do we got next?
All right, when using a normal non-VPN connection and querying on DuckDuckGo, my ISP obviously logs that I visited DuckDuckGo, but do they have a log of what my search terms were, my queries?
If everything's working correctly, no, they don't, because as long as you're on an SSL, you're on HTTPS, then no, yeah, they're going to see that you were on DuckDuckGo. This applies to Google or whoever. If you go to google.com, they're going to know you went to Google, but whatever you search is encrypted. Only Google can see that search. The ISP itself cannot. Same thing if you're using a VPN. The VPN cannot see what you actually searched on Google because that's encrypted. If everything's working correctly, which it should be, just make sure you're on HTTPS, and I don't think that'll be a problem there.
All right, great. We're going to move on to some data removal questions. The first question, going through my online presence and trying to remove my stuff from Google, how can you get rid of a Facebook page from Google? I've delisted that page and can verify the link is no longer available. However, Google, after months, still has not delisted it. I've tried Google's removal tool, but it says that the site page still exists, which is true, and then rejects my request. What can I do?
You need to look for the Google removal option where you supply a word. The way this works is, and you'll need to be logged into a Gmail account, a Google account. You'll have to go to their Webmaster Tools, and then you go to the page, which is going to ask them to re-index a page. And what they're going to ask you is, tell us a word that is on the page that we are caching or that we are indexing that's not there anymore. And then when you put that word in, Google should go out and say, okay, first of all, does that word still exist on that page? If that word still exists on that page, then it's not going to do anything. If that word that you put in exists on their cached copy but doesn't exist on the current copy, then they should refresh it. So you might not be in the right area. You are looking for that area in the Webmaster Tools where you can ask Google to re-index a page, and you can provide Google a keyword. Now, what also could be going on here is if that page on Facebook, if Google can't see it because Google's not logged in and they can't index it properly, that could be part of the problem. That typically is not a problem for Google. They have ways to kind of get around that, I think, with permission from Facebook to index more. But it might be that Google is not seeing the full page where you might be providing the word that you think Google should be able to see, they can't see. But basically, look for that option where Google says, insert a word that is no longer on that page so we can go check that. And that, I think, will give you better results. If that doesn't do it, just time, I think, is the only thing you're going to have. Wait till Google re-indexes it. One other thing I would consider, if there's a page on Facebook that I wanted Google to reindex and they weren't doing it because I asked them to, I would probably take my homepage at inteltechniques.com, put a link to that page because I know that Google is going to index my page often. Then they might index that new Facebook page, and then they might go re-index it and update it on their side. So you might be asking them to query a page which doesn't have much activity. It doesn't have any out or incoming links. So that is something too. You could also maybe even, if you had to, link to that Facebook page on Twitter and then ask Google to reindex that Twitter. We're really getting down a rabbit hole here, but you're at the mercy of Google. Just make sure you're in the right spot. All right, that was a long answer. What's next?
Okay. For removing content from the list you provide, so I'm assuming they mean the packet, should I ever create an account?
Ideally, no. So if a person's search website says you have to create an account in order to see what we have, in order to remove what we have, no. But there are some of these new people search sites which are mandating that you can't remove it until you create an account. I think Spokeo is one of them now. So ideally, no. But if you're just giving them an absolute burner email address, I don't really see the problem. If they're wanting money, then no, forget that. I would stay away from that. But if you're giving them junk information, I don't see too big of a problem if the end result is to get that information removed.
Okay, and then we had dozens of questions that were basically, how can I remove myself from X site? In one case, it was www.selfie.systems, but there was many questions that basically said, for this particular site, how do I remove myself?
Common question. We're seeing more of these Chinese-ran people search websites which don't offer any opt-out, don't offer any contact. Your stuff's on there because they bought it or stole it from some other site, and now you can't do anything about it. I think this is one of them. So let's run through it live. So if I go, the website's selfie.systems. If I go to host.io/selfie.systems, I can see that looks like they are running on a virtual server. They're not on a shared host, so it's just their server they're running. If I look at the Google Analytics, I can see that they run like 6 different websites based on people search, so this is definitely their game. So if I go to, so their IP address for their server is 94.102.51.38. If I go to ipinfo.io / that IP address, that tells me it's in the Netherlands. Looks like it's hosted by ipvolume.net, and it tells me right there that their email address for abuse is abuse@ipvolume.net. All right, so if this were me, you're not going to get anywhere trying to contact someone on this site. You're not going to get any action done. I would start a daily email to abuse@ipvolume.net explaining what information's on the site, how it jeopardizes your privacy or safety, and your demand to have it removed. The only thing that email address is going to do is forward that to the contact they have who runs that site. And that contact still might not do anything. But in my experience, if you start sending a daily email to this hosting company who is now forwarding it to the person who runs this website, you're annoying to them, and they are very likely to just say, what do you want removed? Fine. Leave me alone. Quit emailing my hosting provider that they forward to me, because they might worry that they might get their account suspended or something like that. Don't send threats. Don't send DMCA, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't apply over there. That's your only option. Will it work? Who knows? But that's what I do for any site like that. Find out their hosting and start annoying the hosting provider, who will then annoy the person who hosts the site, and that squeaky wheel might get the grease and you might get it taken off. All right, what's next?
All right, makes sense. So next we have, is it possible to remove your information from FCC websites? I deal with radio. I've tried in the past and always got told that it is public data and that they will not remove this information.
I have, not specifically like ham radio, but I have had something like this where it was a government website. The client voluntarily provided information at the time, which now is public information, much like a ham license. There are 2 things I've found that works. The first is to blame it on a child, but don't yell at me yet. Let me explain that. I've contacted them and said, hey, my minor, my 13-year-old kid has the same name as me, and my name's on this site with my home address, and the kids at school are using it to dox my kid and my kids, and safety issues, whatever you want to throw in there. Even though the entry is not a child. If it has the same name as a child, technically you could cite some COPPA, C-O-P-P-A stuff in there. And in my experience, they just don't want to challenge you on it. They'll remove it because they don't want to deal with anything involving a minor. The other option, if you don't want to go that route, update, don't remove. So you might not have the power to remove your entry as a licensed whatever with the FCC, but you can say, hey, I've moved and I want my entry updated. And then you can provide a mail drop or something like that, so at least your home address isn't on there. And that goes to a lot of the stuff. If you can't remove it, try to update it and update it with bad information.
All right. Fantastic. Next, we have some questions regarding addresses. First one, should I ever use the names of previous tenants of my home for package deliveries? It seems like that would work since the post office has a history of them there.
It depends. The usual answer is no, and that's because USPS will forward things. I did this once. I made this mistake of I was in a rental. I used the previous tenant's name at that address because I thought, well, that mail will definitely get here. But that previous tenant had put in a move order to the post office, so all their mail was being forwarded to them at their new home across the country for 1 year, and my package was forwarded to them, and I just had to eat that one. So typically, no, I don't. I guess if you have someone who lived there 18 years ago, maybe, but I don't see what the point would be. I would rather just use an alias or something like that just to make sure you actually get the package. I typically don't use previous tenants.
Yeah, and I think that does also violate a best practice of avoiding adopting any real characteristics of another real person without their consent, because it can start to go down a road that you might have some liability as far as identity theft.
Yeah, and there's not. Did you cause anyone any financial loss? Probably not.
No.
But why push it? Remember, the whole deal with privacy is we don't want the spotlight. We want to do things as commonly as we can, as just the small needle in the large haystack. We don't want the attention, so I wouldn't push it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next. Are there any privacy concerns using my previous residential address that I no longer live at as the home address on file with a bank, while using a PMB as the mailing address in order to comply with the bank's restrictions on PMB?
I've done this, so let's dissect it a bit. Privacy concerns, maybe not a huge. Well, I guess there could be. So here's what I had to do once. It was with Square. Square had my account set up with my PMB. Everything's good. And I had to make a change to my account. And they said, well, no, you can't use the PMB. And I told them, hey, you've been using it for 7 years. Why can't you use it now? And it started a big argument. So they wanted me to insert a real address. So I just put in my old address I lived at, I think, in 2011. And they're like, okay, great, welcome. So the security issue and the privacy issue, I guess, too, is if they mail anything to that address, you're not going to get it. It's going to go to some house where someone else lives. They can see what you're doing. Maybe they could try to social engineer and reset a password via postal mail. I don't know. That's unlikely, but it's possible. Now, that being said, I've done it just to get past it. As long as they let you use your a valid address as the mailing address to get everything, I don't think it's a huge deal. What they're doing there is they're just asking for your information and putting it through a third-party verification service. When that third-party verification service runs whatever you gave them with that old address, it sees a match and says, oh, yeah, we've got a hit. We've got history with that person at that address, so this must be okay. This guy's good to go. Let him have the account. As long as you modify everything afterward, after the verification's done, I don't think it's a huge deal. I've done it. Nothing bad's happened, but you might be different.
All right, next question. Do you know how people that have their PMB address on their driver's license handle the situation when inquired by police where they live and when they get pulled over for a traffic violation? Have you heard of situations when having a PMB address became complicated concerning law enforcement?
I think a lot of it depends on the attitude during the traffic stop. I've been in this seat. I've been pulled over twice in the past few years. The one was a state trooper who did give me a citation. All he said was, is this address current? And my answer was just yes. Nothing more, nothing less. No, it's a PMB. I'm a full-time traveler. Just yes, because it is. It's my current address, and I can get mail there. I've been asked, is this valid for you to receive mail? Yes. If I were asked specifically, do you live at this address? I wouldn't say yes, because that's a lie. I would probably respond something like, it's a current address. Yeah, anything there, that gets to me. whatever. Don't lie, but you also don't have to volunteer information. If you have a PM address on your driver's license, that is a legal address to use. You can get mail at it. I wouldn't say my house is there because that is a lie. I would probably deflect a bit or just answer yes or no questions the best you can without lying.
Yeah, and I would say in most cases the officer doesn't really care.
Right, it's
like
it's a ticket.
It is verification so that you're certain to get the paperwork so you don't end up getting a warrant. But for the most part, I can't imagine caring if the person gave me a, something other than a live residential address.
Yeah, and you're right. It's basically so that you can't go to court later and say, I didn't know I had a warrant, I didn't get the mail. Well, then you should have given your valid address.
Yeah, exactly. All right, the last address question. In an earlier episode, he, I think they probably mean you, stated that nomad residency, for example, obtaining residency in South Dakota using a PMB from America's Mailbox, as a government employee won't work. Can you clarify and explain some of the reasons why not?
Well, I doubt I said it wouldn't work for government employee. What I probably said was it won't work if you are filing for a clearance, for some kind of security check. If you are going to get a TS-SCI clearance and you only give them your PMB, that's not going to work. I think that's what I was probably getting at. Lots of government employees can use a PMB, especially military people. That they're allowed to use pretty much whatever they want because they're all over the world. So I don't think that's the issue. The issue is if you're having a background check done, especially for some kind of escalated clearance, that's going to be the issue. You can use a PMB as a mailing, but they're going to want to know where you really live. I've been through this. My last... Well, it's been a while now. My last TS-SCI renewal, it was trouble because all I had was a PMB and they didn't like that. So that's the issue I think you're going to run into.
Okay, and that's a pretty common question we get is, will living this privacy lifestyle kind of screw up my government work or my clearance? And I agree. I think if you just own it up front anytime it's brought up and explains the circumstances, people in our line of work doing these background checks are used to this, I think, by now.
Yeah, when I had my meeting, all I had was a PMB, and actually they sent a guy, kind of a secret squirrel guy, to the hotel I was currently at because I was traveling to interview me. And his question was, well, where do you live right now? And I just gave him the hotel address because technically I lived there. And he kind of laughed and said, okay, I think I'm starting to get this. And everyone's mileage is going to vary with this. If you're a brand new employee going for a background check, it's going to hurt you worse than if you're a 20-year veteran who's saying, no, I don't want my home address on the records anymore.
Right, exactly. Okay, next section, mobile devices. You advise against buying second-hand devices. What's your advice on selling devices?
I don't sell my devices, but that's more because I'm always testing things and I like to have a big box of phones that I can pull from and test, so that's why I don't sell. But I guess if I had to put on my paranoia hat, what's to stop me from monitoring your username on Swappa, waiting for you to sell a device, be the first person to buy it, and then get it and do forensics on it because I'm getting ready to sue you and I've got an expert witness. That's the paranoia side, which doesn't apply probably to people. So for me, I wouldn't get rid of them just for that. I know you can wipe a phone and, okay, maybe the top evidence guy in the world can't get much after you've reset an iPhone, but we don't know that. We don't know what new Cellbrite thing is coming out. So that's my take. Maybe you have something different on that.
No, similar, but I should weigh on this because what I always think of when this comes up is I, being sort of a jack of all trades in my job, one of the things I'm trained on is cell phone forensics. And I remember sitting in a class, and I think we were down in San Diego, and we had boxes and boxes of phones. And at one point during the week, because it was a boot camp style class, the instructor was explaining where he got all the phones and was showing us all these sites that claim that their phones are 100% DoD standard wiped, yada, yada, yada. And over the course of the week, we were able to pull personal data off of every single one of the phones. So I always think back to that when people come up with this type of question. Any phones that were used for anything or devices used for things very sensitive, I really believe in just taking a hammer to them. That's my own personal thing. It depends on your threat model, but absolutely on the forensic side, you'd be, even on wiped devices, we're typically able to get data off.
Yeah, and what are we talking? Maybe $100 you're going to get for a trade-in, or maybe a couple $100 for a
Yeah.
sale. Is it worth all the things you've done to keep yourself private? I think that's where you have to weigh that balance out.
Absolutely. All right, next question. I've always had mixed results when trying to activate Mint Mobile 3-month prepaid SIM cards and successfully obtaining a working number. Hours of attempts later, what worked several months ago doesn't work the next time. Can you please share specific steps that have proven to work reliably for you?
The most reliable is always to do it through the app. I just did this the other day. I installed the Mint mobile app, and I think this would apply to a lot of these services. I'm not just picking on them. And then put the SIM card in, and then let that app see the SIM card, let that app activate the SIM card, and let that app do everything. That's the best way because you have no involvement with anyone else, and it should work because it's reading from your phone. I did do one just last week because it was a brand new iPhone without an iCloud account, without an Apple ID, and we needed to activate that phone before installing the Mint mobile app, which puts you in this catch-22. And I chatted with support, went to their website, chatted with support, gave them the information on the SIM card, gave them the information on the phone, and they activated it for me. And when I got to a cell phone signal, everything just worked. But I have seen issues where when you don't do it through the app, you might not get reliable data on the phone. I don't know if that's an issue with pairing that SIM to that phone, or I don't know what's going on there. But I have seen that. So for me, it's always through the app and no other way, just because that always works the best.
All right. Next question. Is the Librem 5 telephone by Purism worth it? I have a choice of declining the telephone and receiving a refund or getting the telephone.
This is going to get me in trouble. No, I don't think it's worth it. And I'll let you weigh in a second, too, because I know you're in this position.
Yeah.
The Librem 5, the Linux phone by Purism, which was, I think I had the CEO on the show 5 years ago when it was supposed to come out, and it's still not really ready. So you can get it, and you can do some stuff with it, but you're not going to do as much as you think you are. And in my opinion, a non-Googled custom ROM on a Pixel device is 50 times better right now, and it's way cheap. So if it were me, I would be getting that refund and getting something better, but I'll let you answer this definitively.
Yeah, so as someone who just got another notice of delay, although it's not really worded that way, but like my phone just got delayed yet again, so I'm not even at that point where I can decline and receive the refund. I feel like, a device that's really at this point 4 years delayed, and there's just no way it's going to be up to par with some of the other options we have now. And I mean, I, as someone who invested in this, feel a little bit burned, mostly because they keep asking me if I want to invest in the company. And I would like them to deliver something first. So I feel a little bit burned by Purism, so I probably wouldn't do business with them again.
No.
And I would agree that the hardware on this, there's just no way that it can be up to date. And I don't think you're going to get the adoption rate because of their distribution problems that you would need to have this really become a thing.
Yeah, a Pixel 4a, a $200 Pixel 4a, maybe $300
Yes.
Pixel 4a is going to be much better and just instantly work with everything you need, even with a custom ROM on it. You're going to have all kinds of issues with Linux. So for me, I'm done with that. I've just kind of moved away from it. Okay. It was a great idea. It was great intention. Kudos for them for trying it. It just didn't work. And so I would recommend get the refund.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, final mobile question. I'm having issues getting the camera to trigger on Haven. What sensitivity setting do you use?
My sensitivity setting would probably have no impact on you because there's a few reasons. Haven is very old now. It hasn't been updated, I don't think, in 2 years. It still works. You can get it to work. It's kind of a dead, I shouldn't say dead project. It's just not being updated. The camera settings, the sensitivity settings to turn the camera on when it was made was probably designed for phones of that era. So now new phones that we have are of a different era, different camera, and those sensitivity settings are going to be very different as well. The sensitivity setting I use on my device might work great for me. It might work awful for you. The only advice I have is you really have to play with it. You have to just keep testing, keep trying different things. Unfortunately, I don't think that app's going to ever receive any more love. It was a great app at the time. It would allow you to take an old Android burner phone, put it in a hotel room. It would watch for anyone to come in via the camera and let you know over Signal if you wanted to, hey, this person's in your room right now. So great app, great everything. It's just getting outdated, and I think that's the reason we're seeing these problems, because we're not getting updates which make it work better on current phones.
Makes sense. All right, so let's move on now specifically to Graphene OS, because I know that's something we always have a lot of questions on. It's a high return of investment for the work going in, but it also can be pretty complicated. So first, Graphene OS question: is there a workaround to getting privacy cards on Graphene if the web link keeps taking you to the Google Play Store?
Yes, I'm glad this was asked. Okay. Graphene OS is now updated to Android 12. When it updated to Android 12, we've seen a lot of different settings come in and different configurations, and I think that's what's going on here. My guess is when you had Android 11 based Graphene OS, you could hold a link to the Play Store and choose to open it through an external app, and it would open it to Aurora Store, which would let you download that. After the update, I bet you can't do that anymore, and that's a setting. So if you go, let me get my phone, get this right. Go to Settings, then Apps, then Default Apps, Opening Links, enable that. Then go to the Aurora Store option, go to that and enable it, and then click Add Links. It'll show you links to like Google Play, enable those, and then go back and try it. So what's happening is, I think your phone lost a setting to open Google Play Store links in the Aurora Store, and you have to go re-enable that using those steps I just gave you. And once you do that, go back to say privacy.com or whoever you were trying to use, go to the Google Play Store link, click it, and then choose the option to open in an external app, and then it should open up in the Aurora Store. I don't know why that got changed, but something got messed up there. Doing that reversed it for me. If worst case scenario, you could always download the APK from a site like APK Mirror, install it, and then Aurora should see it and start to get you updates for that. I've had to do that before with a few apps.
All right, and you mentioned previously battery drain with the latest Graphene OS. This listener says, mine is terrible. Did you ever figure anything out about this battery drain?
Yes, great question. I'm going to tell you what works for me. A lot of people aren't going to like this. When I updated to the Android 12 version of Graphene OS, my battery went down to about 6 hours on a full charge without even hardly using it. And the reason is a lot of the apps are running in the background in a way that they are just abusing battery because they're constantly checking. Since we don't have push services by Google by default with this, and you have an app like Signal, Signal can see, oh, well, you don't have push services, so you don't have a way to notify you if someone tries to call you. I'm just going to let this run in the background 24 hours a day, and I'm going to constantly ping my connection back home to see if you have anything waiting for you, which is going to cause massive battery drain. Now, here's what I do. I put all of my third-party apps, which I've downloaded, into restricted mode. You can do that by going to Settings, and then Apps, and then select whichever app you're going to do. So in this case, let's just say Signal. Settings, Apps, Signal. I'm going to go to the notifications and just turn them all off. I'm going to go to the battery option and change it to restricted. What that will do is when you are not looking at that program, when it's either in the background or turned off or closed or whatever, it's going to put it in a restricted mode where it can't access your Wi-Fi constantly and drain down your battery. When I did that, I put all my third-party apps into restricted mode. I'm now getting 2.5 days of battery on my Graphene OS device. However, I get no notifications. So I don't get notifications anyway because I don't have Play services. So I'm okay with that. If you do that with Signal, Signal is now no longer going to notify you when something's coming in. So you have to decide if that's worth it. Here's what I would do. I would put every third-party app that you've downloaded to your Graphene OS device into the battery restricted mode. I would then decide, what do I need to be notified? Do I need Signal to ring my phone because my kid might be calling me? That's important. Okay, so let's go reverse that for Signal. Do you use LinPhone for incoming phone calls and you need your phone to ring when that number's called? Fine, go back to LinPhone and reverse that. The more apps you put into restricted mode, the better battery life you're going to get. Again, exceptions might be your primary communications you rely on, or if you have maps running, that could be an issue too. I don't like notifications on my phone. I check my stuff. I do a pull, not a push. So therefore, I put everything in restricted mode, and now I can charge my battery or charge my phone every other day.
All right, next up, recently I upgraded to Graphene OS 12 on a Pixel 4a, and in the app permission controls, a new item appeared called Nearby Devices. I can't disable this for all of the apps. Is there any way to disable this feature, and is there a chance that the device is scanning for other devices beyond my control?
This is also an Android 12 thing, and it's for wearable apps. It's designed for that smartwatch. You've got that smartwatch, and you need your phone to tell the smartwatch, hey, I just got a signal message, so that you can see that message on your smartwatch. By default, that permission, the nearby devices, is enabled for every app requesting it. It doesn't mean they're using it, and it should be prompting you if an app actually tries to use it. So if you want to be careful, you can go to, hold on, I don't get it right. You can go to Privacy under your settings, Permission Manager, Nearby Devices, Apps with Access, and you'll see all of the apps who have the ability to access nearby devices, which again is like a smartwatch via Bluetooth. You can disable all those, but again, that's not just sending your data out. That's not doing anything without your permission. It's just giving you the option if you want to wear a wearable device, like with a wearable app, you can do that. But yeah, I turned them all off. Why not? Because I don't do that stuff. So now I just know that they won't try to connect.
All right. If you don't use iOS anymore, what devices do you use in your home? And to what extent would a Graphene OS phone with anonymous service be compromised by connecting it to home Wi-Fi with a pfSense firewall and VPN and using it outside the home? Also, what is your opinion on preloaded Graphene OS phones that try to appeal to privacy customers?
Man, that is a complex. That's like 8
that's
questions.
A bunch.
That's a cheat.
Yes.
Someone cheated. All right. No, I do not use iOS anymore for anything, ever, period. So what I use in my home, I use a second Graphene OS device. I know it's silly. I have a secondary Pixel 4a that has Graphene OS on it, that's never had a SIM card in it, that has the cellular radio disconnected in airplane mode and only connects to Wi-Fi. And I can do everything on it that I can do on the device which I use when I travel, which does have a SIM card in it. So I basically have a clone of 2 Graphene OS devices. Now, that being said, a lot of people are asking, well, since it doesn't require an account, doesn't have Apple, doesn't have Google, it's not calling home, could we just use our one device? And I think that there's a situation where that might be possible. I think that's okay. I don't want to say to someone, oh, no, you can't use one device. It's up to your discipline. Do you have the discipline to make sure it never leaves airplane mode from your home? Then you're probably okay. Accidents happen, but it's probably fine. For extra credit, I guess you could remove your SIM card before you come home and also put it in airplane mode. That's even better. It's just up to how disciplined can you be to make sure that happens every time. As far as your Graphene OS connecting to your home Wi-Fi behind a VPN on a pfSense firewall, I don't see much risk there. Yes, there's always risk. There's always a digital trail. There's always something, but that's the nature of phones and technology in general. So if I only had one device and I needed to use it in my home, fine, just put it in airplane mode and do the best you can. If you can have 2 devices, great. And we could do a whole show just on that. My point is, I just want to say that because I'm not using iOS or typical Google devices, I don't have that hardcore opinion of you should have something separate for your home if you're disciplined to make sure it never connects to a cell phone tower. As far as my opinion on preloaded Graphene OS phones, I would say avoid them for several reasons. First, it's not that hard today to put Graphene OS on a phone. The web installer is really easy now. It's really hard to mess up because it makes a lot of the decisions for you. So if you're wanting to order a preloaded Graphene OS phone from a stranger on the internet because you don't think you can do it yourself, I disagree. You can do it yourself. It's quite easy. But the main reason would be, if you want a Graphene OS device, you're down this rabbit hole, you're into this stuff, why would you want to order it from an internet stranger who could be doing who knows what to that device, to that software? You don't even know where that device came from. You don't know how it was used. You don't know who used it. There's a lot of unknowns there to have some internet stranger say, oh, you're into privacy? Let me put custom software on your phone. Trust me, it's clean. Yeah, you could verify stuff and you could update it and do the auditor, but I don't see a situation where that's a good idea. Do you got anything further on that?
No, I agree. I know for me, having separate physical devices helps me compartmentalize easier because I screw things up all the time. And, on the preloaded device side, I think across the board on privacy, we've found that cutting corners or turnkey solutions are really contrary to what we're trying to accomplish. It's like when people ask about things like LifeLock or Delete Me, on the data side. Yeah, they're going to maybe be better than nothing, but they're not going to do a great job because none of those turnkey solutions do. And it's always best in the end if you can do it yourself.
Also, if someone else does it for you, you're not going to have a great understanding of what's going on, and they're not going to be there to hold your hand every time.
Yeah, and if you're using Graphene, from what I've seen, you're going to have to be prepared to do some troubleshooting. And, like you said, you have to really be kind of into it.
Yeah.
And so if you're concerned about not being able to do all of this on your own, it might not be the best fit.
Agreed.
So, all right, next, some VoIP questions.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Lots of
Google,
mobile. Jeez.
Yep. Google Voice is not available for me in the UK. Could you suggest any alternatives?
Run your own VoIP. Twilio, Telnix, whatever you want to do. It's better than Google Voice anyway. You should be able to do that. There's plenty of UK numbers for those services. It's just not free.
Perfect. Next, I am using the VoIP Suite application, which works fine. For some reason, I cannot receive calls on my other VoIP apps anymore. What can I do?
Yes, this is a bug. I think the bug is fixed. Not necessarily a bug. Michelle added the option that you can make and receive calls through the VoIP Suite app, which was before just a text messaging app, which is great. The downside of that is that overwrote your settings through Twilio or Telnix to forward calls to, say, LinPhone. The solution now, I think if you install that app for the first time now, it asks you, do you want to get calls through this or through whatever you have set up, and you can choose. But if you got caught in that, 2 or 3 week time period where everyone's incoming calls were being forced to VoIP Suite instead of LinPhone, all you have to do is repeat the steps for the incoming calls within Twilio or Telnix. So whatever you did to set up Twilio or Telnix to have incoming calls go to LinPhone or whatever you're using, just go repeat those. When you go to Twilio or Telnix and you look at your number, it'll even have the option already in there for you. It'll probably say that incoming calls are now being handled by a webhook with this VoIP Suite application. You can change that drop down and say, no, I want to go back to the thing I set up originally, and then it should fix that. I would say it's probably a small number of users that have that issue. Not a bug, just kind of an unintended consequence of a beta application, but I think we got that straightened out now.
All right, next. VoIP service jmp.chat looks pretty promising, but how does the service compare to the Twilio and Telnix in terms of user privacy? And why did you decide to create your own open source SMS calling solution instead of just using that open source SMS calling jmp.chat, which has been under development for 4 years?
Let's start at the beginning. JMP Chat is a VoIP option. It is a service. It's a service which will give you a number and let you make and receive voice phone calls and make and receive texts. It's VoIP. They're basically getting VoIP numbers in bulk and then reselling them. It's a service. I guess it's kind of similar to MySudo, not quite as polished, but it's got some similarities. Now, that being said, the question of why don't you use JMP Chat instead of our VoIP suite, I guess the same reason I don't use KeyPass XC to make phone calls. It's because that doesn't work. That's not how it works. JMP Chat software is open source, but it only works with their service. You can't just plop in your self-maintained Twilio and Telnix numbers into it and get phone calls through that service. It's not designed for that. I have no problem with JMP Chat. I guess the reasons I don't use it are several. One, it's 3 times the amount of money than just getting the number myself. 2, I'm now giving a third party more control. The whole point of doing VoIP yourself is to get out of the third party. If you want to get a number through JMP Chat, now you're paying them, a third party, to get the number from another telephony provider. You now have reintroduced a man in the middle who has control, and they own the numbers, you don't. When I have a number myself through Twilio or Telnix, I have that number. I have control. I can move it. I can port it. I can do whatever I want. It's not the same with JMP. Again, nothing against them. They're providing the service, but It's at a cost. Now, if you want to pay 3 times as much and you want them to own your number and not you, then go for it. It's probably more turnkey. The reason we did this project was it gives us control of that number. We have our own software, which we can self-host, which we can plug in these numbers, and it just works. That's the reason why. The comment of why haven't you been using something under active development for 4 years, I don't think that has any play in this at all, because it doesn't. That's not what it works for. Having 4 years of development doesn't make it work for our needs. It's a different product. It's a service. I get a ton of people contact me saying, well, why don't you just use JMP Chat? And every one of them I've asked, well, are you using them? And they always say, well, no. And I think there's a disconnect of what they offer. They're a service that happens to have open source software. They are not a software provider which you can use to just drop in your own numbers.
All right. You promote the use of VoIP numbers for privacy, but aren't you now just trusting them instead of your phone provider? I don't get the difference.
Fair. Yeah, so VoIP, let's say you've got through Twilio. Aren't you just now trusting Twilio instead of your, let's say, T-Mobile provider? Yeah, pretty much. There's no difference there. The difference is in the security. If my true cell phone number gets exposed online, a bounty hunter or a PI might be able to get information from me with a subpoena to T-Mobile to find out where I am and geographical location and what tower did I hit off of. That's concerning to me. If I use a VoIP number through Twilio and you get that same information, Twilio just doesn't have that to give to them. They can confirm I own the number with the court order, but they can't say, here's the cell phone tower he's hitting off of. That's the main difference. So, of course, it's not end-to-end encrypted. It's not private. I'm now trusting Twilio instead of T-Mobile. That doesn't change anything. The content can still be discovered. The content can still be subpoenaed. All of that. You're not safe. The safety is I'm now no longer using my true cell phone number, which can be abused in many more serious ways than a VoIP number. That's the whole idea for me.
All right. On to the next section. Now we have children and family.
Oh, good. I can put these on you.
Yes. So, first question. How do you talk to your friends and family into using secure comms, especially when they are not tech savvy? So I assume they mean like getting them on board with Signal, Wire, or some of the other applications we use.
Yeah, the first for me is a polite request and an explanation. Hey, here's why I use it. Here's why I care. Here's why you might care. Here's why you might not care. Just it's a conversation. Then, if that doesn't work, I tend to blame it on a new phone. Hey, I'm getting a new phone, new number. It's all messed up. Just download Signal and I'll contact you through there. That's worked for me. If I want to be mean, I put them on a delay. So if I've told my friends, hey, look, I don't text via text number. I use secure communications. I might get a message from them and just not respond to them for 24 hours. And then they get so tired of that, they move to Signal because they're tired of my 24-hour delays. That's kind of mean, but the final one, I think I've talked about this in the show. I had one person in my life left using typical cell phone text messaging, and I told her, oh, I got a foreign number now. It's a UK number. It's plus 44, whatever. Yeah, you can text me, but it's going to cost you $3 a text. All of a sudden, she was willing to go to Signal. So that's me. You tell me the rational, polite way to do it.
Well, rather than that, I'm going to share a cautionary tale. And that is, I have a certain number of friends who will no longer follow me to new platforms. And so the mistake I made early on with some folks was, we tried Threema for a while, which was great, but there was a small cost involved. And so we couldn't get everyone on board. So then we moved over to Wire, and you start hopping from platform to platform. And what I should have done is committed to the strongest platform up front, probably Signal or Wire, moved everyone on board and stuck with that. Because if the perception from your friends and family is you're constantly maybe making them switch platforms, you will lose them. And that's happened to me in a few areas of my personal life where I just asked too much of people. So if I were to do it over, I would have hopped on probably Wire and just stuck with it through all my different private life groups.
I started on Wicker, so I had the same problem. I had to get everyone off Wicker. So yeah, great cautionary tale.
Next question. How does one safely date in today's world while being a privacy-conscious and safe person? How do you bring up your personal privacy and security to the potential partner?
I'm not qualified to answer this. I'll weigh in.
I don't think I am either.
But yeah, I don't. I know everyone uses dating apps today. So that you got your uphill battle right away. I've always thought about creating a new privacy-friendly dating app for the weirdos, but I just assume it'd be all married men trying to do things. So I will offer a few random thoughts. I believe you can still meet people in real life and you don't have to use dating apps. Maybe I'm naive. I think honesty without conspiracy is good. I think you can have an honest discussion about your privacy beliefs without coming off as a conspiracy theorist or a crazy person. I think also being offline and not having all that junk on the internet that people are going to search could help you, because that's becoming more popular because everyone's Googling everyone. So I don't think you look as weird as you did 3 years ago. I guess my final thing would be, let this help you find a proper mate. If you are meeting people who think you're just insane for your privacy thoughts, then that's probably not going to work out anyway. Maybe when you meet that person who says, oh, wow, that makes sense. I get it. That might be a good filter for you. Jason, with all of your extended online dating experience, what do you got?
This is just a feeling, but I feel like privacy is more mainstream now. So I don't think there's going to be that judgment. It's definitely easier if you're in a line of work where that is a logical topic to come up in conversation. I work in IT security, or I work in law enforcement, or I work for the government. Then it is a natural thing for you to bring up and talk about why, you value personal privacy, and that makes it much easier. But I wouldn't imagine this being as much of an issue. 20 years ago, you probably would have seen tinfoil hat. But I think now people respect these choices. That's just a feeling, though. I have nothing to base that on.
Yeah, it seems like you'd have some street cred by not having all that junk out there. Like maybe you would actually stand out as the better catch. Again,
yeah.
I'm naive there, but whatever.
Yes, there's a ton I don't know about online dating, and most of my experience is setting up like bait operations or stalking the stalker. So I feel like I'm probably pretty cynical on that front.
Yeah, I always just assume if I'm online dating, whoever I'm talking to, it's either a catfish thing or it's a scam.
Yeah, or serial killer.
Ooh, better, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next. When it comes to data surveillance, what are your thoughts on neighbors' security cameras capturing and collecting data from private citizens without their permissions? Is there anything that we can do to prevent this from happening on private property? So what I'm reading into this is, it's like my neighbors who see that I have 15 million cameras throughout my property, and maybe there's some concern about what am I recording of their personal lives as they come and go. Does that seem like what they're asking there?
Yeah, I think it also probably just weighs into all the Ring doorbells. Like I've heard of so many people who their neighbor has a Ring doorbell pointed right at their house, which I get. So the first part of that was, what are your thoughts? Well, I don't like it from a defensive standpoint, but I respect it from an offensive standpoint. But I do want to acknowledge that second part, which was, how do we prevent this from happening on private property? I think that's a bit of a misconnect. If I have a camera on my home, even if it's facing your home, it's not on your private property. There's the question of, does someone have the right to film my home from the street? And the chances are the answer is yes, they do. It's not great. I don't like that, but that's where we're at. That's why CNN can pull up a news crew on your street and point a camera at your house and just wait for you to come out. And you really can't do a whole lot about that. Well, you can, but it won't be legal. So I don't like it, but I don't know what you do. I think that there's something to be said for a polite conversation. If you get along with your neighbor and you can have that polite conversation over a beer with your neighbor, like, hey, what could I do to get you to not point that thing at my house? Just, I got kids and stuff. Is there a compromise we can make? I think that will go a lot further than I'm calling the police because you're recording me and I've, freedom, whatever. So my take is there's not a whole lot you have the power to do unless there's specific rules, but I think that a bit of kindness and understanding and discussion might get you further than threats. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a building bridges scenario and letting people know, hey, here's what I have going on. And again, if you're comfortable with this, but here's what I have going on. Here's why I'm doing this. Here's why you don't have to worry about it. I can tell you in my scenario, I'm not a super social person. I don't like inviting people into my business, but I have had conversations with most of my adjacent neighbors. And I even have a neighbor where, I explained kind of our situation as a neighborhood, and they allowed me to put up some gear on their property. So I was able to put some cameras up in a tree that really helps better protect both of our properties. And then they know if they have an incident, they can come to me and I might be of some assistance there. But that takes a little bit of, culturing that and really building those relationships can be beneficial. And I think it's one of those things that it's better to broach in conversation first, if possible, and then hope for the best. I think if you don't get along with your neighbors, there's really nothing that you can do that is going to make people happy.
I think it's also just one of many reasons to have that good relationship with your neighbors. I've been in situations where I didn't like my neighbor, but I faked it because having that good relationship and not having the drama is easier and better for my life than if I stand my ground and say, hey, I don't like you because of this. So I think in general, getting along with your neighbors is probably one of the most valuable things you can do in a new home.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, what's next?
My underage child is on a soccer team, and oftentimes parents film their child playing with their phones. It wasn't really that concerning, as I assumed the footage is probably didn't leave their phones until I found out later that one of the parents from our team was filming the entire game and uploading them to YouTube without speaking to the other parents. I want to speak to this parent, but before I do, I was wondering how you would handle that conversation.
That's all you, because I have no experience here.
Well, first of all, this does not surprise me at all. These days, I just expect every public sporting event that kids are involved in to be put online by someone. And especially during COVID, even the organizations such as the schools started putting all of these things online because parents and other spectators were not allowed to go to events. And that's still true some places to a certain extent. So I don't think there's going to be any getting around this happening. I think relationships with other parents can be very tricky because parents, in my experience, don't like to be told what to do. So I would handle it similar to the neighbor scenario, where don't come in with an offensive attitude, come in with a building bridges attitude, see if you can build that rapport, and then maybe offer a private solution for hosting the videos, and you could be the person that kind of sets up a good situation for the parents to share stuff. I am telling you, they are going to share it. And this is going to be a steep uphill battle because they want grandma to be able to see it and Aunt Sue and all these other people. Plus, the internet's about bragging, and what do people love to brag more about than their kids? So I think it's going to be difficult to talk people out of posting things unless you give them another option.
Great advice. Okay, let's keep going, and I will try to pick up my answers with some more brevity. But
okay, firewalls. I am looking at getting a Protectly Vault and installing pfSense. I use Proton VPN consistently, but notice from time to time that certain servers go down for maintenance. If this occurs while using a server that goes down, it would seem to be a pain to make that change in the firewall. That said, I have two questions. Is it possible for you to make a change in the settings you've provided to allow for a second or third server option if the primary server goes down? And I'm running pfSense on Protectly Vault with Proton VPN and Killswitch. How often do you see your connection drop?
Well, you can absolutely add. I think, I'm pretty sure in the third edition of Extreme Privacy, I even spelled that out, where you can identify the IP addresses of the servers you want and then add multiple. That way, if one fails, you can carry over. Now, what's important there, though, is let's just say you live in New York and you choose the first 5 New York servers' IP addresses. Every time you boot up that vault, it's going to choose one of those, maybe at random, and make sure that you have access, and then you're going. If all 5 of those go down, which does happen, an entire rack of servers could go down, you would need a failsafe. So what I would do is, again, using New York as an example, if I lived in New York, I would pick 3 or 4 New York Proton VPN server IP addresses, add those, and then maybe add one from Florida. That way, if the whole New York system's down, but Florida's not, it will cycle through them until it gets a connection and say, oh, this 6th one makes a connection through Florida, I'll just use that. That's what I do on mine. So I have a nearby servers. Basically, those are, I list all of them by IP address, and then I add one that's kind of in the next quadrant over of the country. Therefore, and it's happened where my servers went down, but it picked up on that last one and took it over. So that's in the book. Definitely do that. I recommend that. As far as how often do I see my connections drop, almost never, but when I do, it's usually my internet going down and not the VPN. But it does happen. So I've learned to quickly just go to 192.168.1.1, pull up, log in, and just refresh and get a new IP address, and that tends to fix it. So I don't see a lot of downtime, but also I reboot. I shut down all of my internet stuff every night when I go to bed, so I'm fresh the next day on a fresh reboot. I think that helps.
Right. Next, should I connect IoT devices to the guest ISP network or guest network behind the firewall?
For me, it's always the VPN firewall. If I have any IoT stuff, I want it going through my network, behind the firewall, behind the VPN, so that my true IP address is not getting out. However, I do have an exception for that. If you have some type of online security cameras and you go out of town, I think it's okay to put those directly to your ISP as long as you have some anonymous account which you access them from, because if your VPN goes down while you're away, you can't just come back and reset your equipment easily. So that's my exception. If I were going out of town for 2 weeks and I want my cameras available to me on the internet remotely, I would put them right to my ISP because there's nothing on those systems connected to me anyway. That way I know I have access. If my internet's up, I have access to that.
All right. Whilst you recommend Proton VPN, is it possible to follow your Protectly pfSense approach using PIA or Mullvad? Can your scripts be tweaked? Are we on our own?
It's difficult because they are available. So if you have the third edition of Extreme Privacy, I used PIA as a secondary VPN option, and on the scripts page, you have the option to download them specifically made for PIA. So the question, can it be used for PIA? Yes. Can my scripts be tweaked? They could, but they're already out there for PIA, so you don't need them. Now, if I were rewriting Extreme Privacy today, I would take PIA out and I would replace it with Mullvad as a secondary. I like Proton VPN as my primary. I have Mullvad as my secondary. And yes, you can absolutely tweak those and make them work for Mullvad. Mullvad has a guide for pfSense on their website. Just follow that and you'll have no problem. So yeah, all that can work. Just I wouldn't say you're on your own. The PIA stuff's out there. You can grab it if you want, but I think it's always better to be on your own and know how that stuff works. So I would grab the Mullvad pfSense guide, and you can easily modify what I've done and make it work for you there.
What is it about Mullvad that made you kind of add that as your PIA replacement going forward?
Well, a lot of it was just PIA just constantly doing these things that make me cringe a bit. And I'm not blaming them. Everyone's screaming about PIA because of Cape buying all these VPN companies. Yeah, they're a business. Their goal is to make profit. Their goal is to make a lot of profit and make a lot of money. So I get it. VPNs are popular. They're buying them all up. They're making money hand over fist. I don't blame them for that. What I don't like is, as a privacy purist, I guess, if lack of a better term, I don't like that it's getting so big. They're buying all the review sites. It's just getting a little bit shady for my liking. I was willing to look past some of that history with Cape and advertising stuff because they thought that was where the money was. I don't believe for a moment that Cape cares about any of our privacy. They care about making money. In order to make money, they have to make sure their product works. So I don't think they are selling all of our data from the VPN. I don't put that hat on. But we have options, so that this is where we get to make the options. So for me, it was more of I'm leaving PIA because of all these things, and what's my next best? I think Mullvad is. That started because you could pay with cash. You still can. You can drop money in the mail, put your code in, and then you get money on your account. That's pretty cool. I don't know how to be more anonymous than that. So that is what got me into it. Now, Mullvad's growing. They're getting huge. Firefox is jumping in. Malwarebytes is jumping in. So who knows? We might see them become the next conglomerate that we all say, boo. I don't know what's going to happen. But that's why for me. And that could change next month.
All right. The next one is a pretty big question. Do manufacturers design backdoors in their products? Okay. For instance, should anyone purchasing a phone that is made in China be concerned about unknown eavesdropping methods through hardware exploits?
My first question is, find me a phone that's not somehow made in China. So that I think you can't just go by that. Can or do manufacturers design backdoors? They have. I'll butcher this. Huawei? Is it Huawei? How do you pronounce it?
Huawei, I think.
Huawei, all right, look what they've done in the past. They've done some shady stuff. So can they? Of course. Do they? They probably have. Are they on everything? I doubt it, but that's why we seek things that we can change. So for example, if I order a Google Pixel, that phone's definitely made in China. It's got Google software on it, but I have the ability to completely wipe it out all the way down to that root level. And the software is what's going to do the damage, not the hardware. There's going to be some kind of software out there doing something. So is that perfect? No, of course not. Is there ways around that? Sure. My wireless router is one that I can flash with open source software, which I trust more. So that's the bigger thing to me. Good luck finding stuff that's not made in China, at least some of it. Focus more on, can I wipe it out and put trusted stuff on it? And that, I think, is going to get us better privacy and security than just putting a blanket statement of, I don't want stuff made in a foreign country.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on your threat model, because I know, like, I use a lot of Lenovo laptops because I just like them from a productivity and how they feel standpoint and power. But if I had a super sensitive operation or, portion of my business or government work, I would use something like a System 76 because it has some additional privacy when it comes to the hardware and how it's built and produced. So I think there are a range of options, but it really depends on your use case. And I don't think there's an across the board, like, don't get this product because it's, has parts made in China.
Yeah, I think it's make the best decision you can based on what you have. We have
Exactly.
to have trust. There's no way you can have any technology in the world and not trust someone making it. There's a lot of trust because we can't control so much of it. It's just make the best decisions.
Yep. All right. And speaking of trust, now let's talk about passwords and MFA. Does using Twilio Authy 2FA for multiple accounts allow Twilio to join up these accounts into one user?
Well, it depends on what you're referring to. Can Twilio see that you have 8 Google accounts in your thing? Yes, especially if you use the barcode to do it in. But if you're just putting in the seed code, so when I go to a service that says, hey, you set up your 2FA, scan this barcode, I never do that. I say, I can't scan the barcode, give me the code, and they give you what's called the seed code. Then you put that into Authy. So now Authy knows that you have that account, that connection in there, but they don't know your Gmail address. They don't know what specifically it is unless you tell them. So I could get a seed code and probably, and I'm assuming here, so don't yell at me, but I'm assuming if I took the seed code, I could just say that's Hotmail and not Gmail and put Hotmail in Authy, and whatever I label it is, Authy can see that. So be careful what you label things. But as far as can Authy say, oh, this Gmail account belongs to this Gmail account because of this and this and this, I don't think so. I'm not claiming to be the expert on that. I'm not claiming that a forensic person can't go in there and really decide and see all kinds of stuff. I don't think they can, and I don't think they're looking for that. But it's a fair question that we should research. I'll do some more research on it. I think the answer is no. They just see the seed code if that's all you give to them. It's whatever information you give them unless you know something different.
All right, next question. My bank offers the below 2FA methods, and you can only choose one. Which do you believe is more secure? Yeah, I don't really know the rest of that.
All right, let me find it. Hold on. Okay, I'm looking at this message. I think some of it got cut off. So the options they have are SMS text. Oh, okay, I see what's going on. Okay, so their bank has two 2FA options. Either you give them a phone number for an SMS text, or you have to answer one of 3 pre-canned security questions. And I've never seen that choice. I thought it was going to be, I have the choice of SMS text or a software token, but this is different. So for security, if I had to choose between an SMS text or answering a security question, it would always be the text, but I would do it through a VoIP number. So if you have your own VoIP number or Google Voice, which has its own secure 2FA, I think that is much better than a pre-canned security question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if you do give those security answers, don't give the real answers. Just
Right.
make up a long string and put that in your password manager. Because you want to be random, not something someone could guess about you.
It seems to me that social engineering could work better on a bank employee about security questions versus send me a text.
Yes. Yeah, that's why we always want those answers for the security questions to be nonsense.
Gotcha. Okay, what's next?
I've been using KeePass XC on Windows and Linux for quite a while now based on your recommendations. I've noticed that the update frequency has slowed quite a bit. The latest version was released in June of 2021. Should we be concerned, and is it safe enough to use KeePass XC to store 2FA backup codes? If so, why not use it for 2FA TOTP instead of Authy?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. KeePass XC apparently has not had many updates. I'm okay with that. KeePass XC, if used optimally, you're using it offline anyway. It's not an online service. There's also, I wouldn't think there's much that would change there. I could probably use a version of KeePass XC from 2 years ago, and it's just fine to use, especially if I'm using it locally offline. So no, I don't have a concern about it not being updated since June of this year. I think that's okay. And I think that as a community, we are putting a little bit too much pressure that, apps have to be updated every week. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I'd rather see apps not have updates, and when they do, that they're really well vetted and they're beneficial to us versus getting some weekly update, which then breaks something else, and now we have to wait for another update. So, no, I have no concern about the release of updates for an offline program. That's fine with me. Now, the next part, using KeePass XC to store your 2FA backup codes or your 2FA codes, I don't like that, and it's all my eggs in one basket scenario. Yes, you can absolutely use KeePass XC for your two-factor tokens, your software tokens, and then you have everything. But now, in my opinion, that is not two-factor authentication. That's one-factor authentication, because if I have access to your password manager, if I have your main password to your password manager and I can get in it, I have your password and I have your code. So for me, no, I would not do that, because now you are no longer true two-factor authentication. I want that separate entity that I have to go get a code from, whether that's a hardware token or a software token. I want that separate thing that makes it harder for someone to get everything at one time.
Makes sense. All right, I use 100 plus character passwords where I can. Will this future-proof likely technology advances, including quantum computing?
Well, first of all, if you're using 100 plus character passwords, I think you're going to be fine in your lifetime. I think we will do away with passwords before people are cracking 100 plus character passwords. But my official response to this is it depends on what the hash is. If you have a 100 character MD5 hash, yeah, that could take a long time, but quantum computing, okay, maybe they can crack that. Versus if you have a 100 plus character password with a SHA-512 hash with a salt, that's going to take a lot more time. So I think you're probably concerned when you shouldn't be, and by the time you should be concerned, we will have moved on to something else.
Yes, definitely far from low-hanging fruit, so I think probably good to go. All right, now we have some email and social network questions. I've been trying to regain access to my Facebook and Twitter account, which are linked to an email account which I can no longer access. If I could regain access to the Gmail account, then I will be able to regain access to my Facebook and Twitter account. Any thoughts or ideas on steps I can take to regain access to these accounts?
Well, you definitely need to get access to the email account. That's going to be what you need. I mean, you could try keep access into Facebook and Twitter with different passwords. For me, it would be, let's focus on the email account. Google's not going to help you. Try old passwords. Keep trying the option to reset. So every time you can't log into a Google account, there's an option to say, hey, I've lost my password or whatever, help me get in this. And they might offer one way of, hey, if you do this, we'll let you back in. And next week it might be a different way. Okay, if you know this, if you know an old password, we might help you out. So keep trying that, but also don't forget breach data. I had this when there was an old account I used when I was in law enforcement, which I have long forgotten about, but someone from where I worked reached out and said, hey, can you get into that account and assign me because I need to get in that account? I had no clue what the password was, but knowing that I recycled my passwords back then, I went to old breach data. I found some passwords, I put one in, and sure enough, I got in. So consider breach data. That might, in a way, be good and beneficial to get you back into an account.
All right, next question. I have multiple free Proton Mail email accounts. How could they detect this, and are they likely to care?
I think they care when you abuse it. They can detect it. They can't see what you're doing, but if you create 100 Proton Mail accounts in 10 minutes, they're going to know and they're going to block you. If you log into 100 Proton Mail accounts from the same computer in 10 minutes, they're going to know and their automated systems are going to block you. I think that's what they care most about. I think most people have more than one Proton Mail account. I do. I have lots, but I try to justify that because I do have a paid account which has enough aliases which would allow that anyway. I just like the segmentation.
All right. If I use an email forwarding service like Blur or Simple Login, can my true email address get exposed by clicking on click tracking links in these forwarded messages?
I assume this means like an affiliate link that it might go to a product, but it's got a unique code just for you. No, I don't think so. If that's what you're asking, no, I don't think so, because you're going to expose whatever information they put in that link to track you, and they're going to use that in your browser. I don't think that they're going to have a way to see your raw headers to say, oh, well, this email originally went to that person. So if you're asking what I think you're asking, no, I don't think that's a huge concern.
All right. Is Fastmail masked email a good alternative for Simple Login?
I think it depends on how you're going to use it. If you only used Fastmail and you use Fastmail's masked email with your Fastmail account, then no, it's not a good alternative for Simple Login because now you're still in the same spot. If I have a Simple Login account that's anonymous and they don't know who I am, I have that extra layer of protection. If I'm sending masked email from Fastmail connected to my real Fastmail account, I don't know that that's, I guess it's masked from the receiver, but it wouldn't be too hard for things to start getting put together. So I like their option for that. If you like it, that's great, but I don't think that's a replacement. We want, again, that segmentation. We want that third party that doesn't know who you are, that allows us a bit of isolation from one thing to the other.
All right, and while we're talking about Simple Login, I did notice on our Matrix chat today that there was a tip where you can email the Simple Login folks, and they don't advertise this, but if you say you're interested in a deal on a lifetime membership, I think over the next couple weeks for like $80, you can get a permanent license. So a lifetime license for $80, which I'm already a premium Simple Login user, that's a pretty good deal. So good time to get on board with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good deal if they stick around. We always worry about that. We look at these lifetime things and then companies flop. I don't think that about Simple Login. They seem to really be putting in a lot of effort to maintain something long term, but definitely always evaluate a bit of, do I think this company will be around long enough for me to get the value out of it? I think in this case it is, but always look at that.
Yeah, and I just look at it as they're a company I've been doing business with. I like how they've treated me. I like the service they provide. So I also like the idea of sort of supporting that. So, all right, let's move on to financial questions. What's your finance baking privacy strategy?
That's invasive. What's my finance baking privacy strategy? Never buy anything in my real name. Okay, I'll go further. Own an Umbrella Shelf LLC in a nomad state, have a 1% member who's the public face and the signatory but doesn't have any actual business decisions, open a business checking account in the name of that LLC, get masked debit cards and checks, then use that to open up a business American Express in the alias name but with the business name, and have a good attorney/accountant to keep it all legit. What's next?
All right. Do you still use a Chase credit card in an alias name for in-person purchases, or should I just withdraw a majority of my money from the bank and only use cash? And what personal details do retailers see at the back end when we buy something online or in the store with a standard credit card?
Well, the Chase part's easy. No, I will never use a Chase product ever again. Not only due to privacy policy, just customer support, and in my opinion, just an overall awful company. That was probably a little more biased than it should have been. But no, I don't use Chase. I use American Express. Their business cards allow for alias name usage. I like that a lot. Now, what do retailers see when you buy something? Well, it's definitely different with online and in person. So if I go to the store and I use my credit card, that machine's probably just collecting the credit card number, that expiration, the name on the card. That's probably about it. The exception is gas pumps might ask you for a zip code or a postal code. When they do that, they're just verifying, does that postal code match what that credit card thinks it should be, yes or no? If it's yes, let the sale go through. If it's not, don't. So in person, I don't think they see much more than what you see on that actual card. Now, online can be a bit different. They definitely see information about your connection, IP address, some information about your computer, what operating system, your browser, etc. They see whatever information you provide on that online form. They also can see things like they can ask you for your phone number, and they can query that with the credit card to say, they just provided me this phone number. Is that the phone number on their account? Yes or no? And that credit card can verify that and tell you, which can help them determine if it's a fraudulent purchase, someone's trying to hide. So that's the reason why if you make an online purchase with a legitimate credit card, but you put a fake number in, it might get rejected because it didn't match. Or you put a fake zip code in, it might get rejected because it doesn't match. This can also expand from here based on what kind of system you have. Especially the Square systems and things like